Welcome back to the deep dive. I bet a lot of you are like me, obsessed with maximizing every second, right? You try to cram your schedule and bombard yourself with info.
I hear you.
But what if I told you that doing nothing?
Doing nothing.
Yeah, doing nothing. What if I told you that doing nothing is one of the most powerful tools for unlocking your creativity?
Really?
Really. That's what we're talking about today, and we're going to take a deep dive into the connection between boredom and creative thinking.
Boredom and creative thinking.
You heard me right. And it's all thanks to this article on Medium by Ravindra Sadaful. It's called How Boring Activities Spark Creative Ideas.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? We always think about, creativity and bursts of inspiration,
Yeah.
Exciting experiences and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there's more and more evidence that's saying that those aha moments,
This aha moment.
yeah, those aha moments come from stillness and quiet,
Okay.
from boredom.
Okay, I'll admit it. The idea of actually scheduling boredom time into my week.
Scheduling boredom time.
Yeah, making time for it.
I see what you mean.
It just feels weird. But I am intrigued. So, where do we even begin with this?
Well, the article starts off by reminding us of that classic anecdote,
Oh, yeah.
Isaac Newton just chilling under the apple tree,
The apple tree.
and it led to the theory of gravity.
Right.
Whether or not the story is true, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it does illustrate a point.
What's that?
Sometimes our most brilliant ideas come to us when we're not trying to force them.
So are you saying that we should all just sit around and wait for apples to bonk us on the head?
Not exactly,
Huh.
but it does emphasize that it's important to give our minds the space to wander and to not have all these distractions.
See, man. Yeah,
Our hyper-connected world has so many distractions.
it really does.
And this is where this concept comes in. The brain's default mode network.
Oh, I think I've heard of that. It's like when our brain is active,
Yeah.
even when we're not thinking about anything.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's like your brain is on autopilot, right?
Right.
It's humming in the background. Even if you're, doing mundane tasks like
Yeah.
like washing dishes or going for a walk.
Right.
But the research is showing that this network,
This default mode network.
yes,
Yeah.
it plays a big role in creative problem solving
Really?
and coming up with new ideas.
Wow.
And it's during those boring activities,
so boring activities.
when we're not focused on a certain task,
Right.
our brains are more free to make those unusual connections,
Interesting.
those leaps of insight that we wouldn't make otherwise.
So while I'm zoning out folding my laundry, my brain is actually coming up with great ideas. That's kind of cool. But I have to admit, finding that boredom nowadays is a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, my phone is basically attached to my hand at this point.
You and everyone else, you've hit on a major point that the article talks about.
Really?
Our digital devices are making it harder and harder
Yeah.
to just disconnect and let our minds wander.
Yeah.
We have notifications
All the time.
and updates
Yeah.
and endless streams of content and
It never ends.
and our brains are getting wired for that constant level of input.
So basically, we're training ourselves to be addicted to distractions.
Right.
No wonder I can't focus on anything for more than 5 minutes.
Exactly. And now studies are showing the effects of this digital overload, like shorter attention spans,
Oh, I know it.
decreased cognitive capacity, and even a decline in creativity. It's like we're always on high alert, so there's not much room for those quiet, introspective moments where we tend to get our best ideas.
Okay, this is starting to get a little depressing. Are you saying we're all doomed to just be creatively stunted zombies that are addicted to our screens?
Not necessarily. The article doesn't say that we should ditch technology completely.
Oh, good.
It just says we should be more mindful
More mindful.
about our technology.
Mm.
We need to make time for boredom in our lives. Think of it as like a digital detox.
Ooh, a digital detox. I like that. But what would that look like? I mean, how do we actually do that? How do we reclaim boredom in the digital age?
Well, the article says to start simple,
Yeah.
like maybe go for a walk, but
Good.
but don't bring your headphones,
Okay.
or spend time in nature without, posting about it on social media.
Right.
These activities, they engage your senses and they let your mind just roam free without having to look at your devices.
That reminds me of something the article mentions
What's that?
about the author Neil Gaiman. He actually looks for those boring situations.
Boring situation.
Like long train rides with no entertainment.
Oh, interesting.
And he says that it sparks his imagination for writing.
Oh, wow. He calls it a form of creative incubation. By letting himself be bored, it makes room for his imagination to come alive. It's amazing how he uses boredom like a tool.
So we should all just book one-way tickets to some far-off place with no cell service.
Uh-huh. Well, a tech-free retreat would be amazing, but
Yeah.
it's not always possible.
Yeah.
You know, the point is that you can find boredom in your everyday life. It's about being intentional with your time and making choices that actually help your creativity.
Okay, so I'm starting to see boredom in a whole new light.
Good.
But what about those of us who can't sit still and do nothing? Are there any other ways to tap into that creative potential?
Of course. There are all kinds of things that can help cultivate boredom without making you feel like you're wasting time.
Really?
The article says things like taking up a new hobby, like knitting or woodworking, or even doing jigsaw puzzles.
Ah, I see. Those are activities that keep us busy, but they don't make us think too hard, so our minds can still wander.
Exactly.
Okay.
Speaking of managing our mental energy, the article also talks about mindful tech use.
Mindful tech use.
You don't have to become a Luddite
No.
to benefit from boredom. You know there are apps out there
I bet.
that limit screen time or block distracting websites.
Oh, yeah.
And they help create those digital-free zones in our day.
That reminds me of the Pomodoro technique, where you focus for a while and then take a short break to recharge.
Exactly.
Hey.
Those little breaks can be perfect for letting your mind wander and letting those creative connections happen. It's about balancing focused work with that intentional disconnection. It's like we're allowing our brains to breathe a little bit, step off the treadmill and just be. And then that's when the magic really starts to happen.
Okay, I'm sold on the benefits of boredom, but I think a lot of people might be wondering,
What's that?
how do we actually design our lives around it, to encourage more of it?
It is interesting that you mention that because the article highlights this new trend where people are actually designing their environment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to foster boredom.
Okay, like what are some examples?
Well, think about those tech-free zones in your home, like maybe a cozy little reading nook, tucked away from screens, or a dedicated art space, or even just a quiet corner with a comfy chair where you can sit and think without that urge to grab your phone.
Yeah. So it's about making those choices that support our creative goals. Yes.
Rather than just getting caught up in the digital world.
Precisely. And this idea also goes beyond just our physical space.
Okay.
It's about structuring our time. The article talks about this technique called time boxing.
Time boxing.
Which I have found to be very effective.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's time boxing?
So basically, you're scheduling blocks of time for certain activities.
Right.
And you can actually include boredom in there.
So you would have like an hour for work and then 30 minutes of boredom.
That's the idea. Time for going for a walk, listening to music, daydreaming.
Right.
Whatever helps you disconnect.
So we're not just leaving those mental breaks up to chance, we're actually scheduling them in.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's about taking control of your time and attention and not letting those external forces dictate it for you. And that's really the key takeaway here. Boredom is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not something to be afraid of. It's actually a valuable resource.
A resource. That's
A
interesting.
space for creativity and innovation. It's almost like we've made boredom the enemy, and we've totally forgotten about its potential benefits.
We have.
Instead of seeing it as this void that needs to be filled,
Right.
we need to start recognizing it as like fertile ground for creativity.
I couldn't agree more. We've just lost sight of the fact that, our most profound thoughts and ideas often come from those quiet, unstructured moments.
I'm starting to see boredom in a whole new light. It's not being lazy or unproductive.
Not at all.
It's actually giving our minds the freedom to explore and connect and,
Generate new ideas.
Exactly.
It's like a mental playground.
Yeah.
Think about when we were kids, boredom would lead to our most imaginative play. We'd build forts, invent games, create entire worlds in our backyards.
Oh,
It was pure creativity.
I love that. We need to get that sense of wonder and curiosity back.
Yes.
That ability to just see the magic in the ordinary. Boredom is like an invitation to explore, to experiment, to look at the world in a new way.
And the more we do that, the more we'll stumble across those unexpected things that make us truly creative.
This is all very inspiring, but I am curious
About what?
about the practical side of things.
Okay.
How do we actually make time for boredom with our busy lives? And how do we actually convince ourselves that it's not a waste of time?
Those are great questions.
Yeah.
And I think it starts with a change in mindset.
Okay.
We need to go from seeing boredom as the enemy to seeing it as an ally.
So like when we have a few minutes and we're bored, we shouldn't feel guilty about it.
No.
We should actually see it as a chance to recharge and be creative.
Exactly. And, as for making time, it's all about priorities, right? We make time for work. We make time for exercise. We make time to hang out with people.
Yeah.
Why not make time for boredom? It might feel strange.
I can imagine.
But it's worth it.
Okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to schedule some boredom this week and see what happens.
I think you should.
But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I'm curious. Have you seen any really interesting examples of people or organizations incorporating boredom, intentionally?
Oh, yeah. Actually, there's one that pops into my head immediately. You heard of that tech company?
What company?
The one that actually has mandatory boredom breaks for their employees.
Wait, what? Really? Tell me more.
Yeah. They noticed that everyone was always on their devices,
Oh, yeah.
checking emails, answering messages.
Yeah, it never ends.
And it seemed like it was affecting their creativity and productivity.
I can see that.
So they thought, let's try these mandatory boredom breaks.
Mandatory boredom breaks.
Yeah. So for 15 minutes every afternoon,
Okay.
everyone has to completely disconnect. No phones, no computers.
Wow. No internet.
Yep. Just 15 minutes of pure boredom.
Did people freak out?
Surprisingly, no. The results were really good.
Really?
Yeah. Employees said they felt more relaxed and focused and more creative after those breaks. And they came back to their work with new perspectives. They came up with new ideas. And they even found solutions to problems that they hadn't been able to solve before.
That's incredible. It's like proof that boredom actually works. It's not just some silly concept. It can really help our work and make us feel better.
It really does.
So you're telling me we don't have to change our whole lives to benefit from this?
Nope, we don't. Even a few minutes of disconnecting can really make a difference.
This is all very encouraging. It feels like we're at the start of a boredom revolution.
I hope so. I think we're realizing that boredom isn't the enemy.
Yeah.
It's actually an important part of a happy and creative life.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to take a boredom break of our own. We'll be back in part 3 with even more insights and inspiration. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring this connection between boredom and creativity, and I have to say, I'm really starting to think about boredom differently now.
I know, me too.
It's like I'm seeing those quiet moments,
Yeah.
not as wasted time, but as a time for my mind to make new connections.
It's a big change, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And in this last part of our deep dive, I think we should move beyond just the theory.
Okay.
And talk about some actual steps that people can take. How can our listeners actually use this information? How can they bring more boredom into their lives?
Yeah, let's get practical. Let's put all this knowledge to work.
Well, a great place to start, according to the article, is just to become more aware of how we deal with boredom right now.
Okay.
Think about it. When you have a few minutes of downtime, what do?
Grab my phone.
Do you grab your phone? Turn on the TV?
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you look for some kind of stimulation?
Yeah, it's like I can't stand silence.
That's so normal these days.
Yeah.
But here's the challenge. Next time you feel that urge
to grab my phone.
you have that urge, try to resist it just for a little bit.
Okay.
Sit with that feeling of emptiness. Just notice it. You might be surprised by what happens.
Okay, that sounds a little scary, but I'm willing to try it. What else can we do to have more of this good boredom?
Well, remember those intentional spaces for boredom that we talked about?
Yeah.
That's where they come in. Doesn't have to be anything big. Just set aside a few minutes every day for quiet time. Or make certain areas in your home tech-free.
And I love that idea of actually scheduling boredom time in our calendars.
Yes.
Like it's an important meeting we can't miss.
Make it a regular part of your routine. And when those boredom breaks come around, don't try to fill them with activities.
Okay.
This is time for your mind to just wander and make connections.
So no emails, no social media, no making to-do lists.
Exactly. If you're finding it hard to just be, you can try those tactile activities we were talking about.
Like knitting.
Yeah. Doodling, gardening, woodworking, things like that.
Right.
They keep your hands busy, but your mind is free to wander.
It's like giving your brain permission to play. And, play is such an important part of all of this.
It is. Boredom doesn't have to be serious. It can be fun and lighthearted.
I know. Think about when we were kids. So many of our games came from being bored. We built forts. We played with sticks and stones. We made up whole worlds in our backyards.
It was pure creativity.
Exactly. We need to rediscover that wonder that we had as kids. Boredom can actually help us see the world in a new way.
It's like an invitation to explore and experiment.
I like that. And if we do that, we'll find all sorts of unexpected and creative things.
Exactly.
This has been an amazing conversation. It's not just about making time for boredom. It's about changing how we think about it.
That's right.
Instead of thinking it's bad, we can see it as a good thing that helps us be creative.
Well said. And when we learn to see boredom as a friend, it will really make our lives better.
Well, I have to put my phone away, be bored, and see what creative things happen. Any last words of advice for our listeners?
Don't be scared of boredom. Let your mind wander. You'll be amazed by what you find.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of boredom and creativity. Until next time, happy wandering.